Jason Haynes here, Oracle Apex Product Manager Extraordinaire. We got the distinguished Jeff Smith here to talk a little bit about ORDS, and welcome to the Oracle Apex Office Hours here on June 16th, 2022. So I'm happy to be back hosting, and I'm going to be go ahead and go through a couple slides here just to catch us up and hand it over to Jeff. So today, we're going to have Jeff talk about everything an Apex developer needs to know about ORDS with a little bit of SQL Web stuff. And I'm particularly excited to see more about this because I just don't have a chance to use it often enough. We have some announcements and some updates. We have opportunities for you to replay previous office hours recordings. And in the last couple of months, we did, a 5-part series with all kinds of stuff having to do with Apex 22.1 and new features. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that. They're all published and available for you to watch in your free time or in the background while you're doing other work. We actually have new office hours coming up with Monica as the host, who's also here on the call. It's Apex Office Hours Espanol, and there we go. It's happening here at the end of the month, June 30th. Join it if you can. Next week, we have an upcoming personal conference at Kscope in Texas. We're looking very forward to it. Some of the Apex team will be there in person. So if you're going to be at Kscope, please come by and say hi to the booth. Devrel, actually the developer relations booth that we're going to be in, and some of the team will be there, but picking up shifts and hanging around chatting and talking to people all about Apex. Come on by and say hi if you can. We're going to try to have some swag. And other announcements, we have the Oracle Apex 22.1 patch set bundle 1. It was just released just last week on June 7th. It's available for download. When this patch is applied, the Apex product version will be updated to 22.1.1, and you can download that from My Oracle support. Service updates for Apex on Autonomous Database. Apex 22.1 upgrades will begin later this month. You'll get, if you actually have this service, you'll get an advanced email notification if you're a paying customer. And on upgrade day, developers will see notifications displayed and some other details here that you should pay attention to. This is going to affect you. Administrators optionally can defer the upgrade by up to 45 days for extra app testing time. So please make an effort, be aware of how this process works. And it should go smoothly. And we're looking forward to having it all updated up there over the next few weeks. And you can, of course, learn more at the URL there, apex.oracle.com/go/adb-updates. So in today's session, we have for you the distinguished Jeff Smith.
So I want to say thanks to the Apex community for letting me hang out with you folks today. An amazing crowd. I'm on a team here at Oracle that's called Database Tools, and we're adjacent to the Apex team. We both report up to Mike Hitchwa, so we work quite closely and we help build stuff for each other. And obviously, ORDS is a core thing in your infrastructure to make Apex apps available. And so today, I just wanted to give a nice overview of REST data services itself. I'm sure there are other people out there like Jason that haven't had the time to do a deep dive on it. And why read the docs when you can just have someone, play the movie for you? So that's what I'm going to try to do today. Yeah, reading is overrated. Although I do recommend you subscribe to my blog and read my posts every day. I'm happy to take the questions as I happen to see them in the Q&A. I'm sure Jason and the team will try to answer your questions as we go. And I'm going to try to go fast enough that we actually have time to do questions at the end. And this is my contact info. If you want to email me, feel free. Just don't forget the middle initial, the .d, because there's other Jeff Smiths, and they will not respond to your emails or even forward them to me.
Yeah, that whole Smith being the most common surname in the world, or not just the US? Yeah.
I'm not sure about the world. I think China has a couple that outdo the Smiths, but yeah. Thankfully, I have a super uncommon first name, Jeff. So as of the last 18 months or so, generally, if you're running a modern, and let's hope everyone here is running a version of Apex from the last year or so, if not 22, you're going to be using Oracle REST data services to make your Apex apps available. So the ModPL SQL, the XDB HTTP listener are no longer supported. ORDS is the way to go, and it's very handy as a web listener for the database and running PL SQL and returning the HTML content, which is good because that's what Apex needs it for. ORDS actually started out about 10 years ago, and it was called the Apex Listener. And about a year into the development of it, we decided that REST APIs were only going to become more and more ubiquitous out there in the IT landscape. And to have the Apex Listener only service Apex and other PL SQL based apps would be short-sighted. So we wanted to expand the feature set to include making REST APIs available for the things in your Oracle database. And so that basically caused us to rebrand the product. So now it's Oracle REST Data Services, or ORDS. I think everyone here at Oracle gets a bonus for every new acronym we create to confuse our customers. But ORDS is kind of like Apex now. I don't think people call it Application Express or Oracle REST Data Services anymore.
You're very right.
Yeah. So ORDS, I'll say Oracle REST Data Services the first time, just so people know what we're talking about. So if all of the Apex customers, or most of you, are getting ready to have ORDS available, what else can you do with it other than make your Apex application shine and run securely and very quickly? So maybe with the flip of a few switches in your configuration, in addition to the PL SQL Gateway feature and your Apex apps, you could also have these REST APIs. Now, when I say REST APIs, I mean, like, for example, when you go into the Apex workshops, including the one that they have in there for building REST APIs on your Oracle database, under the covers, that's using ORDS to define those and to deliver those. So if you wanted an endpoint for data in a table to share with a partner, that's really what the product is built for outside of the Apex feature. So for example, I have some APIs I've been building to showcase using ORDS with Python, and we're using some spatial data. And I've got an endpoint that I can hit that says, hey, based on 1,000 meters of where my house is, bring back all of the restaurants in Wake County, North Carolina, with their GPS coordinates and their average food safety score. Just with writing a couple of lines of SQL, I was able to do that. I don't have to know Java. I don't really have to know JavaScript. I do need to know the tenets, the principles of HTTP, of RESTful web architectures, but just using the language of the database. And you've done this in Apex before, I'm sure, a little bit, or you've at least seen the screens where you can build these APIs. And I'm gonna go deep on how to do these and give you some examples and some how-tos on this. But this is actually just yet another feature of ORDS. There's several other things you get out of the box. We have something called SQL Developer Web. Now, if you're in the Oracle Cloud and you're using Autonomous, you'll see it labeled as Database Actions. Apparently SQL scares business people, so they wanted to give it a non-tech term, but we always call it SQL Developer Web. The two terms are synonymous, basically. And really, if you've used the desktop application to build tables, to do data modeling, to do administrative tasks like killing sessions, creating users, running AWR reports, we wanted to bring that experience in the browser. I mean, as Apex developers, you know how nice it is to be able to stay just in your browser without having to install anything, download drivers, sort TNS names, connections, yada, yada, yada. We really wanted to have a nice modern experience for the Oracle database user in general, not just the Apex folks. So that's what's caused SQL Developer Web to be born. This is available anywhere ORDS is running. So a lot of people think this is a cloud-only thing. It is not. I'm running it right now on my laptop. You could go put this in someone else's cloud, God forbid. You could have it in a Docker. You could have it in a K8s cluster. You could have it running on your database server if you wanted. Anywhere in your network that has close proximity to your database is a good spot to run ORDS. And you enable SQL Developer Web, and you can provide access to your database to people in the business that need it, and they don't have to worry about managing Java and TNS and all of that, especially if they're doing you know, the 80% of stuff that people are using SQL Developer for, which is running queries in the worksheet. I'm going to do a full demo of SQL Developer Web. And by full, I mean, I'm going to go really fast and give a nice 5-10 minute tour of SQL Developer Web. Database management. So you can build your own REST APIs, and a lot of customers do. But we've also made some for you. So we have over 600 endpoints that you can enable in ORDS. And now you're going to be able to manage, monitor, maintain, and do nice data dictionary reporting on the database, the instance itself. We even have started a few APIs that help you work with Apex. So if you wanted to get just an overview of what your Apex install in the database is looking like today, you could do a GET request on database/Apex/statistics/workspace/the workspace name, and you get that JSON report back. So that's one of like 600 endpoints. Again, I'm going to cover this a little bit later in the show today, but this is a feature you turn on or off, and then you're going to be able to start automating, building dashboards, or even just ad hoc curl requests if that's what you want to do. And then finally, there's a feature called SODA for REST. So SODA is simple object document access. It's a fancy way of saying using the Oracle database as a JSON document store. So kind of like Oracle's take on Mongo. If tables and rows and columns scare you and you like the flexible schema on read that JSON provides, you can turn the Oracle database into a JSON document store, just post up JSON documents, run queries to get stuff back out, but not using SQL queries, using JSON descriptors that show what the data you want to look like come back. And there is a Java driver for that. There's a Python driver for that, but we also have REST APIs for that. I'm not going to demo this so much, but if there are questions on this topic, I'll happily address them at the end. Wow, we must have lots of friends on the webinar today. There's like 75 people chatting in the chat. I hope they're not laughing at my t-shirt or my haircut, because I'm very sensitive.
No, they're not, but I think they're concerned about the volume control showing up in the upper left of your screen.
I am too, and I can't stop that. It's driving me nuts. I'm going to have to throw away my computer and buy a new one.
All right.
I'm sorry you see that.
Probably a stuck key, isn't it?
I don't know. No, I think it's a driver on my computer.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah. Jason, you're good at Camtasia. You can just edit that out in post, right?
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, technically, I probably could figure it out given some time, but
it's been 3 weeks getting that out. Yeah. So I really want to talk a little bit just about API-driven development. So we talk about the true value of data to a business. I heard someone posit the other day that the worst case scenario for Google wouldn't be that they lost all their source code to their web engine technology. I kind of think maybe that would be really bad. The person posited that actually the worst case scenario is they would lose all of the data behind, the decade plus spent, scouring the web, to build those really nice search engine optimized results for keywords. So I think they're both really bad, but data-driven thing that is real. It's not just something us vendors like to say to get you to buy more database stuff. There's a lot of value in your data, in your Apex apps. You're going to be able to build amazing, beautiful Apex apps, and I know that because I've seen them. We're tired of talking about COVID, but it just pops into my head and I can't help it. We have these response apps that our teams built here for people testing vaccines and doctors administrating them. There are lots of partners out there that would like access to that data. How nice would it be if there was a REST API that someone could hit to pull, the data that they're interested in a massive JSON or CSV dump. As a business, you might have business partners that you want to share data with, shipping schedules, part numbers, I don't know, even with customers, you might want to have REST APIs for. So, things like Twitter and other online properties, they have developer APIs that they publish that people can come in and build their own kick butt solutions on top of what they've done. So if you build a nice set of APIs, if they're well documented, if they behave in a way that is expected and kind of follows the rules of the road, your customers are going to do some really surprising things. They're going to build things that you never even thought were possible. But since you gave them all of the building blocks, they're just going to pick up and run with it. That's kind of what all of us cloud vendors have been doing. So when we build something new in the Oracle Cloud, it starts with the REST APIs. And then on top of that, we build command line interfaces. And then on top of that, usually, not always, we'll have a nice web browser-based panel that surfaces those REST APIs. So that's something that you should think about doing for the data, for the objects, for even the stored procedures that you're leveraging for your Apex apps. There might be other ways to slice and dice those up for folks to use with or without Apex. REST APIs are ubiquitous because JSON is ubiquitous, because HTTP is ubiquitous. And why is it everywhere? It's because it's easy. Almost every programming language and framework has libraries for making internet calls. Gee, I wonder why. The internet kind of runs everything now. And pretty much everything, not just JavaScript now, has libraries for dealing with JSON documents. Apex has some really awesome PL SQL APIs that you can use to shred JSON and XML with. Just like that, I mean, you can find those same things in Python and whatever else you may be using. So the APIs aren't necessarily sexy. It's returning a JSON document. Who cares? But when you throw these nice interfaces on top of them, again, like so what Karsten and his team on the Apex group have done, you can use a REST web source that you pulls data from anywhere and then have a kick butt Apex app on top of it. That's all possible because the responses and the APIs are predictable and they conform to our standards. They're also popular for the database because they're a lot easier to navigate than dealing with downloading an instant client, getting your libraries configured, your path set up, especially on your Macs. Apple seems to have like some vendetta against making things hard for developers now, but even on Windows, it's not necessarily easy to set everything up to make a stateful dedicated connection to an Oracle database. But HTTPS, if you've got the credentials, if you've got the URL, you're pretty much good to go. So REST APIs are even being used as alternatives to database links. Now, I'm not saying they're better, but in some cases they might be. So they're just useful and they're easy to use. And so a lot of folks are using them. And if you're a DBA on this call and you have a developer coming up to you and they're asking for APIs to make available for their other development teams and products and partners, and you tell them no, most likely they're going to go spin up Postgres or Mongo somewhere on a box that you don't even know exists, and they're going to start copying your data out and doing what they want to do. That's bad. We want to protect the data, keep it secure, keep it fast, keep it correct, because gosh knows what happens to it once it leaves the Oracle database. So, take advantage of the tech that's just sitting there in your mid-tier ready to use, and then empower your developers to build these things on their own with your oversight and with you checking their code to make sure it's secure and fast and all of that good stuff. So our REST APIs, they're all built on the same languages that the database uses. So today that's SQL and PL SQL, although we have a project in place to bring in the multilingual engine. So soon have REST APIs defined as JavaScript. So the JavaScript running in the database itself, but today it's SQL and PL SQL. So for, I think 100% of the Apex developers out there, you're somewhat familiar with SQL and PL SQL, so you should be good to go on building some really nice REST APIs. There's nothing really new to learn. How ORDS works, it's a Java application that's running in your mid-tier, wherever your web servers may be. And sometimes ORDS is the web server, but it can also run in other Java web servers. But at some point, ORDS is going to get routed in HTTP request, and we're going to inspect that URI, that address, and we're going to say, oh, this is belonging to database XYZ. We're going to grab a connection out of the database connection pool that we're maintaining with all of the databases that we're working with. We're going to look up the workspace or the user or the schema that that API belongs to. We're going to go, oh, okay, he's trying to run something out of the HR schema. So in HR, there will be an API mapped to imp/something. We're going to get the code for that. We're going to run that code as that user. We're going to get the results, and we're going to wind it back down to your curl panel, your fancy REST client, your web application, your mobile app, whatever, as that JSON doc. And then hopefully there's going to be a bunch of links in there, and we're going to have the appropriate HTTP status codes. So ORDS is taking care of managing going from the SQL or the PL SQL to the, ORDS is going to handle going from the web stuff to the database layer back to the web stuff. Not to dumb it down too much. So ORDS is a standalone web server. We use the Eclipse Jetty project to make that available. That's running in Oracle production in the cloud. Customers, probably about half of them are using standalone. After that, maybe even a little more than that. The most popular method for making your Apex apps, your REST APIs, SQL Developer Web available is using Apache Tomcat. It's very lightweight. It's very well supported by the community, and it's free. People like that it's free. And for like our EBS customers and some Fusion customers, they probably already have Oracle WebLogic up and running. So if you have WebLogic available and your IT team is already used to dealing with all the web apps in WebLogic, you're more than happy to toss ORDS into WebLogic as well. So one of those, and generally you're not going to have one web server, you're going to have 2 or 3 for high availability. But one of those can service multiple databases. And on the back end, that turns out to be multiple Apex environments. I have a picture of 4 here, but in our cloud, that can be thousands or multiples of thousands of databases that one ORDS is responsible for. Actually, in Autonomous, what we have is a load balancer in front of anywhere between like 3 and 12 compute nodes running ORDS, servicing all of the pluggable databases in that region. And we've got like, what, 37 regions now, Jason? So it's a very stable, well-tested environment. I think we went from November to March with 0 instances of ORDS having to be restarted. And the only reason we did a restart in March is because we deployed a bunch of upgrades to the fleet. So it's reliable, and you can set it up for high availability. I've got a architecture document that we can share that shows you exactly how to set up ORDS, and that would also include Apex for high availability. We've changed things recently with ORDS on installs and upgrades. There's a new command line interface. It can still be scripted, so you can have unintended installs, but if you're using the interactive installer, it should be somewhat familiar to you, but the command structure has changed. So all of these things that I've been talking about so far are optional. So you can use just the PL SQL gateway for Apex if you want, but you can install ORDS into the database, and then that's what makes things like the REST APIs and SQL Developer Web available. You can even say, hey, I don't want either of that stuff. Just give me those cool database APIs for managing the database. Just give me that if you want. The ORDS installer now will detect if Apex is there, and if so, it'll just prompt me for the location of the Apex images. In Autonomous, not that I'm here to pitch Autonomous, but as an Oracle employee, I think I get in trouble if I don't pitch it at least once. All of this is taken care of you. It's all sorted for you. We're maintaining ORDS for you. We're doing the ORDS installs and upgrades for you. If something comes down, there's another node there ready to pick up the slack. And of course, everyone's probably familiar with the Apex autonomous service. That's also powered by ORDS. You can go in there and do your REST APIs. You can use the database APIs. You can do the SOTA for REST. You can, of course, use Apex in there. So in that environment, everything's turned on. It's just ready for you to flip the switches to set up the accounts and the workspaces to be used. And I'm going to do a SQL Developer Web demo in a couple minutes. But here's just a preview of what it has to offer. So this is our instance viewer in the desktop that we ported as an HTML5 JavaScript rendering. It's got all the same features that you have in the big fat 300 megabyte Java application running on your machine. So I've got an overview of what's running in my instance. I can see what wait events are popping. I can drill down into a top SQL report and get the runtime profile history and even get SQL tuning advice if I want.
That's pretty fancy, Jeff. I got to admit, it looks beautiful.
Fancy pantsy. What impressed me is that the same developer that built this with Java FX taught himself Oracle Jet and JavaScript and basically ported his own stuff across, a completely different universe of code and frameworks. I think it took him a while, but he did it, which I thought was really, really cool for him.
Absolutely.
These REST APIs, we've got two flavors. These are the ones that you build yourself. You can look at things that are already existing in your database, tables, views, stored procedures. And when I say stored procedures, I mean packages, functions, procedures. And you can look at it. You can do this in Apex. You can do this in SQL Dev Web. You can do it with the PL SQL API call. You can say, please publish. And that at that point, you've got for tables and views, a full CRUD set of APIs. And for your stored procedures, you basically have a remote procedure execution endpoint for kicking off those programs. We maintain all of the code behind that. We give you lots of features and we make sure they're fast. So this is no code, as in you literally turn it on and then we do all the work for you. And if you're a control freak like me and you want it to work a little bit differently, at that point, you have to come over here into this other universe where we have our RESTful services, the modules where it's your code, where you define the inputs, you handle the error handling, you decide the response, you decide the HTTP response codes, you generate the links, you do all of the work. And I call this little code. So there, I'm not gonna say it's low code, but because there is some, but it's like, maybe instead of a few thousand lines of PL SQL, you only have 10 or 12. Because really all you're doing is you're calling application logic that's already defined in your database. So it's basically a thin PL SQL or SQL veneer over top database logic. So let's jump into some really quick, super fast examples. I get asked these questions a lot. So if I auto rest a table, yes, this is good for production. Yes, I have customers that use this feature exclusively. And you know why they use it exclusively? They had systems built 20 years ago. They lost that expertise. All of that stuff is in their schema. They want to modernize maybe their Forms app. They REST enable things and they throw some React code over top of it, and they're able to have a brand new experience on the same code they've had in their database for 20 years. So for a table, if I enable that for REST, I can insert a record, I can update a record, I can delete a record, although does anyone ever really delete data anymore? I can do batch loading. So in addition to CRUD, you have batch load. I can toss up a CSV payload and a post request. This is a very simple one. I get 25 records. This one's more interesting. So in Autonomous, in my always free tenancy in Ashburn, Virginia, and I'm in Cary, North Carolina, which is about 300 miles away, give or take, I was able to post up 10 million records in less than 30 seconds in 2 post calls. So I did 2 concurrent requests, 5 million records each, and I was able to batch load 10 million rows to a table over the web, over the internet, crossing multiple networks in less than 30 seconds, writing 0 code. The only code I had to write was the curl command, and I suck at curl, so I didn't even write that. I copied and pasted stuff off Stack Overflow and batched it together. And then I pointed it to ORDS, and ORDS did all of the smart inserts for me, the batch inserts for me. And reporting, so everyone doesn't want every single row to come back. They want only rows that satisfy specific predicates, or they want a specific ordering system. So you can inject, I hate to use that word, you can influence, shape the responses, kind of like GraphQL, by simply adding query parameters to your GET request. So I have a REST enabled table. I can say, hey, I only want employees if their employee ID is greater than 99. We add that where clause to the select code behind this endpoint for you. And that's available for any SQL-based REST API. So that's the auto stuff, and it's your own stuff. If you're using SQL Developer Web, we have a full REST IDE, which I'll show in a second. But as you're in here turning things on and off, we help you build these curl commands for you, just so it's quicker and easier for you to get to hello world. We also have built-in open API views. So we take a JSON representation of the APIs. We give you this nice Swagger tooling. You can actually exercise the APIs directly in your browser. I can run a put, I can run a post, I can run a delete here directly inside of SQL Developer Web to test the APIs. This is also great for documenting the APIs. So that's the auto stuff. I'm smarter than you. I want to use my own code. Okay, we got you. So you're going to create a module. A module is a logical grouping of endpoints. Kind of think of it as like a PL SQL package. Inside of that, you're going to define a template. So this is the pattern. This is the thing that we're modeling via the RESTful architecture. It's usually going to be a collection of things or an individual thing or an item. In this case, I've got a collection called tables/imps. I've got an HTTP verb post assigned to that. When someone hits my API with a post, down below, that is the code that is ran to satisfy the request. In this case, I think I'm adding an employee to a table, and I'm getting the new ID for that record. I'm forwarding them to that record after it's created, and I'm setting the response code to 201. So I'm trying to be as RESTful as possible. I create something, I get a 201, I get a link to that thing. REST APIs, the internet is completely built and hinged on the idea of links. Imagine your Apex apps not using links. How would users get from one screen to the next, or even navigating things inside screens? It would be impossible. So your REST responses are going to be drunk with links. So how do we do certain stuff? Like, how do I join tables? Well, joining tables is as simple as writing a select statement that joins the tables. And I don't want to get into a war or why ANSI joins are no better than Oracle joins, because at the end of the day, Oracle takes your ANSI joins and rewrites them as this Oracle join. But you use whatever SQL you want. We run it for you. We don't judge your SQL. I will judge it if I see it. And out spits back the JSON response when I call it. Now, how could this be nicer? Maybe I could have links to the department, to the job, to the location, to the actual employee record, but I chose not to, so I ain't got no links. It's my code, it's my API, I get to decide how it works. Bind variables, passing information to the code. So this could be PL SQL code, it could be SQL code. Either there's a body that is posted with the request, and in that body is a JSON document. All of the attributes in that JSON document get assigned bind variables automatically. In the URI, if your template includes notation that looks like a bind variable, that's automatically mapped into the SQL or anonymous block of the code. So if I do a GET request on this endpoint /SA rep, that SA rep text is thrown into the bind variable job. And that's what influences my responses. So now I'm just getting the employees that are sales reps. Hierarchies. I want to have not a list of departments that I click into to get the employees. I'm greedy. I want all the departments and I want all the employees right now. Well, you can use the cursor construct in SQL and you can get back what you want. So I've got a nested JSON document. So I've got a department, and then underneath that, I've got the list of the employees in that department. The only trick here is you need to set page size to 0. So this might not be good for result sets that are churning hundreds of thousands or millions of records. And I've got workarounds for that, and I've got approaches and ideas on that. And if you want to learn more about that, ping me. Generating links. I talked about how important links are, so you need to be able to generate links. Anywhere in your code where we see a column or an attribute that starts with the $sign, that's the hot button for ORDS to turn that response, to turn that attribute into a link. So I've got a column down here. It's a string, it's imp slash, and I've appended the employee ID and I've aliased it, double quote, $sign imp record. There's a link included in my response with the label of imp record, and in here is that string. So, if you need to navigate in between modules, it's just a simple matter of // whatever, or you can actually return hard-coded links that aren't relative. It's up to you. Ref cursors. Ref cursors are amazing. They're like PL SQL magic. I'm running SQL. I'm doing it via PL SQL, so I get a lot of control. I've got a stored procedure that returns me a list of songs for my albums. So I do a get or a post, and on that, I'm like, hey, I want to know the songs in Thriller, and out comes back via this stored procedure or via this PL SQL code, a JSON document of all of the songs on the Thriller album. The trick here, I'm saying the output is this bind variable RET, which is defined as a ref cursor by calling the source type response. So ORDS sees this response out. It knows to treat ref cursors like a SQL query result set. So it basically flips the ref cursor into the JSON document, just like it would for a query result set. You can have multiple ref cursors. There's a 0 code option to this. You could simply rest enable the stored procedure that has the same code in it and call it and not have to do any work. Uploading files. There's a bind variable called body. It automatically maps the contents of the body of your HTTP request into a bind variable, either as a CLOB or a BLOB. That makes it really easy for us to grab text files or any other sort of file off an HTTP request and throw it into a table or toss it over into a stored procedure. Simply reference body. Now, if you're going to reference that multiple times, you have to declare a local variable and initialize it to that body or body text, and then use that going forward. You can only point to this bind variable once. Since I'm uploading a file, I'm adding something to a collection. I want the response to be a 201, and I want to redirect to the thing that we just created. So I'm going to do my post. I'm going to set some headers. I've got over here on the file side the actual media of what I'm uploading. I'm going to do the upload, and the response is going to be, hey, here's that file you just created. Using PL SQL to download files. You probably got code like this all over in your Apex app, so you can do it for your REST APIs as well. So I've got some PL SQL that's running, that's doing the database work. It's generating the file that's going to be downloaded. I'm using the OWA toolkit to do this work. I'm using WPG to actually download a file. This is the code part of the API. And this is the little code part of the API. All I'm doing is calling that stored procedure with the appropriate parameter. A lot of our customers' REST APIs look like this. They look like 3, maybe 10, 15, 20 lines of code. They don't have like huge anonymous blocks recreating the wheel every time. They're doing the same thing you're doing. They're trying to build stuff into reusable PL SQL in the database and then just leveraging that. Security, you want stuff to be secure, right? So all of the REST APIs for ORDS, you've got several options. You can use Apache, Tomcat, you can use WebLogic to secure the endpoints. You could use API gateways. You could do all kinds of things, but the basics, we have basic authentication for database user password. We recommend you do not use that. It is slow and you don't want to share database credentials with people that aren't supposed to be in your database. So what we give you out of the box is a nice OAuth 2 workflow. So you can create clients and they have secrets and they request access tokens. Once they get those tokens, they can hit any endpoint that those clients have the privileges for. And we have a complete UI to build out and use that workflow in SQL Developer Web.
Hey, Jeff, before you move on, one question Christian had about what about SQL injection with these bind variables? Is there anything you can say to that?
That would be horrible. And we've made it virtually impossible for that to happen because security, SQL injection, I mean, that's a huge risk for opening up the database to anything, especially HTTP. So it's sorted, you're good to go.
Thank you.
Yeah. You could try to do something really stupid. It's probably still not going to work. But don't try, and review your code and review your developer's code to make sure they haven't accidentally done something, not stupid, but ignorant. Yeah, you'll get the old 401 if you're trying to access something you don't have access to. I'm running out of time. I haven't gone fast enough. So Oracle Database is amazing. It supports all of these different data models, all of these different types of workloads like data warehouses, online transaction processing, JSON document stores, all kinds of different types of data, user-defined data, spatial data. ORDS supports all of those puppies. So here's the SOTA for REST. I'm doing a GET and I'm asking for a SOTA document. I'm saying, give me JSON document XYZ, and not using SQL, we're using the SOTA workflow. We go and get that document back. If you are working with Mongo developers, we do now have a Mongo listener for Oracle. So you can actually use Mongo calls on an Oracle database and get the same set of features. Spatial data, we automatically take SDO geometries and bring them back as GeoJSON. XML, it's old, it's kind of dead, but people are still using it. There's a rich XML type and XML library built into the Oracle database. You leverage and use those just like you always would. You just need to tell ORDS that the payload it's delivering is XML, and then your browser, your apps are going to be able to handle that. Machine learning, this is the new cool stuff. And all of course, the hundreds, if not thousands of analytic functions, they're all available to you. There's a really nice lab out there where you can use machine learning to find a good, cheap wine that tastes good. Former PM of ours, Charlie Berger, built that. I think he's just cheap and likes wine, but it's kind of a cool set of regressions you can run through. All powered and made available by ORDS REST API. So I don't have to know the SQL. I just have to be able to do get, put, post, and delete on the APIs that you give your customers. All right, SQL Developer Web demo. I'm going to show that real quick. How much time do I have, Jason? 5 minutes? 7 minutes?
No, you're good for 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
10, 12 minutes? Sure. I don't have much at the tail end here. Keep
You're
going.
super nice for letting me.
We got questions that we need to go through. I mean, and I don't know how much time it's going to take to answer some of these questions. So, let's wing it.
Let's look at the questions real quick. Any plans to support ORDS on AIX? No, because Oracle Java is not available on IBM hardware. But your database could be on AIX and ORDS could be running on a Docker somewhere just for connecting up into it. Does the database API require ORDS to be installed on the database server? Yes. ORDS was created primarily for easy access to the database, but how about administering external non-Oracle database endpoints? Nope, we're only there for the Oracle database, although we are adding support for MySQL. GraphQL planned? Yes, GraphQL is on the roadmap. Get ready for it, Facebook fans. The HA doc, the reference architecture, it's geared for cloud, but it uses 100% technology that is available on-prem. So I wouldn't say it's cloud agnostic because the automation script we give you builds the high availability architecture in OCI, but the diagrams, the pieces, the components, they're all available to you on premises. Will AUTOREST support Oracle text queries? I don't know. Good question. Try it and let me know what you find. Will there be support for MySQL? Yeah, we're working on it. So, okay, SQL Developer Web. So you have a worksheet, you have a workshop, you have a data browser in Apex. Why would you care or use SQL Developer Web? I think this stuff is more powerful. If you're doing quick and dirty stuff, totally stay in Apex, because switching contexts from one universe to the other will slow you down. But if you're going to be spending more than a few moments in pure database mode and SQL Developer Web is just sitting there, it might be worth having two browser tabs open instead of one. So just like the desktop tool, it's based on your privilege level in the database. My HR user, I'm sorry, I'm logged in as admin here, so I'm basically God. I've got access to the full enchilada of features. This is in the autonomous universe, but I could also use this for my on-premises database. This is the SQL worksheet. So the same features that you would have in the desktop, we have here in the browser. So I've got like Insight. This is using a VS Code based editor. So I've got access to the VS Code command palette to do fancy, cool stuff. A lot of the keyboard shortcuts are the same. So Control Enter, Control Space Bar, all of those are the same. Your result sets down here in these grids have a lot of the same features. We, of course, have export to Excel and CSV. The SQL Plus library is here, just like it is in SQL Developer Desktop. So I can run things as F5 and get the standard output down here. So I think I haven't tried this in a while. Hopefully this still works. I can run this and get it back as a CSV document instead. Yeah, so now I've got a CSV document. Yeah. I always think it's super cool. It's always nice to hear other people think it's kind of cool. You might be in one of those lonely databases where there are no tables yet. So just like Apex has data loading features, we do too. So you can point to an Excel file and create a new table, or point to an existing table and load it. It's kind of the same workflow Apex offers, so I'm not going to show that.
With export?
With the import.
Right now, does it also support exporting data or unloading data?
Export is here too. Yeah. If I'm looking for something in the dictionary, I could come over here and futz around with stuff, but that's kind of a pain. So I also have this new search feature. So I can just look for imp, and we'll search the dictionary for you. We'll bring back a list of hits. Oh, beers.imp. That sounds interesting. So that's
that's great.
One. I don't know what this is yet, so this could be bad. I'm going to hit Control-1. We're going to auto navigate to it, and we're going to auto open the object. And so now I can click on the data panel, and it's probably just boring employees. Yeah, that's kind of a disappointment. So I hit escape, it closes these sliders, but it's navigated, it set the context to my navigator to that search term that I just used. Doing other things in the tool, we got the hamburger button here on the top left. I could switch over into the REST IDE. This is similar to what Apex has. Doug Galt did an awesome job building that. It's been a few years. So we've taken what he did and kind of built on top of it. So I would say this is the reference architecture for having a web IDE for REST APIs with ORDS. So I have my collection of modules. I could also switch over to my REST APIs. If I click into a module, I'll have my templates, I'll have my handlers, I'll have my code, I'll have my parameters, including all of those implicit binds that I can access. I can generate the open API clients from here. So I can say, give me the open API view for this 101. I just have like a 101 module that I use for like doing proofs for people. Like someone said, hey, can ORDS do Unicode, including Arabic? And I'm like, yeah. So it just did a GET request on this, and it came back with, gosh, what I hope is actually a true nice greeting in Arabic. That's as good as Google. That's as good as Google Translate did. When you're ready to secure these, we have the OAuth workflows available here, so you can create, maintain your clients. You can rotate secrets. You can get bearer tokens. We give you the code to use to get your bearer tokens, so it's just easier to learn the OAuth 2 workflow. Oh, what else do we have in here? Back on the SQL worksheet, there's wizards for creating tables and procedures, just like what we'd have otherwise. I would show more, but we're running out of time. I'm going to just blaze through this. Those 600 endpoints that you got, once you turn them on, we break them down into various categories. Most of them are gets. We do have some pretty powerful puts and posts. Data guards available now. I can do a data guard failover via REST call now. Machine's gone down. I needed to fail over to the standby. That's a post. I can run data pump in here. If I want to data pump a schema, that's a simple post command. This is the parameter used to turn it on. And then you go to the Oracle database docs. What I suggest you do is instead go to ORDS and get the Open API JSON payload. Feed that to your favorite REST client. I use Insomnia. Most people use Postman. They both support this. You ingest it and bam, you got your 600 endpoint of menus to play with. So here's an example of what data pump looks like. I can do exports and imports. There, question time. Finally, quickly, awesome crowd. Even though I can't hear you laughing at me, I know it's happening. Thanks for sticking with me.
Absolutely. It's all good, Jeff.
We can do more Q&A. I know you wanted some time at the end too, Jason. I'm happy to.
No, we're doing fine. We're doing fine. One thing I'd like to ask, I'm going to be selfish and ask this question myself. What can you do in terms of blobs of uploading or downloading them from the database using SQL Dev Web?
You can do both.
Okay.
I can't remember what I called it in here.
I'm happy with hearing it's supported.
It's absolutely supported, and I had a slide for it, but I went so fast. I was basically not hoping that anyone would read what's on the slide, but just see that checkbox. Yeah, that's covered. And if they wanted to learn more about it, they could back right, uploading files. Yeah. So uploading files, you're going to have probably a post. It could be a put. You are going to have on the body of the request the actual file that you're uploading. You can do anything you want with that file. You're going to reference it via this bind variable body. This maps the contents of that request as a blob, a blob. So if you have a blob column in a table, it's a simple saying insert into table values :body, and that will go into the blob column of that table.
All right, great.
If it's text, or you want to treat it as a CLOB, you'll say :body _ text, and you just map it to a CLOB. For downloading, downloading is as simple as select MIME type, blob from table, and you set the source type to media resource, and then ORDS simply streams the contents of that down to the client. We don't do the JSON magic to it. We're just like, hey, take the text, take the binary bits, include the MIME type, pass it down to the client, let them deal with it. Oh, that's Adobe PDF. Okay, open up the PDF reader.
Okay, but it's not doing anything fancy like base 64 encoding or anything like that.
You can do base 64 encoding yourself, but no, I mean, we just basically read the blob, strike it out of the table, and stream it down to the client. Yep. I appreciate a greedy moderator. You get what you want.
No, that's all good. Let's look at a couple more questions before we wrap up.
On premises, check. What load balancer is recommended? The one that you like and know the best. Are the REST modules created here visible inside of Apex REST services screens as well? Yes. So there used to be something known as the Apex REST. that's been migrated over into the ORDS-based repo. So whether you're using SQL Developer Desktop, SQL Developer Web, SQL Plus, Apex, when you're making the calls to the ORDS APIs, they're all pulling from the same repo. So if you're in Apex and you need to build a REST API, stay in Apex if you want. If you want some of the more fancier, more advanced type stuff, and you're going to be doing other database stuff as well, feel free to go over into SQL Dev Web. If you do save or commit, and you come back over into Apex, you're going to see the exact same stuff because it's all reading from the same central dictionary. Ask Jeff to talk about the connection pool. Well, the default connection pool size is 10. That means when you start ORDS up to talk about a database, we're going to give you 10 UCP, universal connection pools to the database. That's going to be good for exactly, 0 of you in production. For development test boxes, it's fine. All that means is if I send 100 GET requests to ORDS, it's going to have 10 database connections to sort those requests through. And if your database code is fast and it can respond in tenths of a second, you're not going to have anything queue up or back up because it's just going to zoom through those. If you've got an Apex app that calls a stored procedure that takes 7 seconds to run and 30 of your friends hit it and you've got 10 connections in the pool, that's bad. So what's the right size for your connection pool? It depends on how awesome your code is. There is an amazing resource out there. The A-Team has a video series on how to properly size connection pools. It is not ORDS specific. It's not even Java specific. It is math specific, but all of the things equally apply to our stuff.
So thanks to everyone as this draws to a close for Jeff's session and talking about ORDS for Apex developers. One thing I want to throw out there is to make everyone aware that the Oracle Apex Ideas and New Features app that's at apex.oracle.com/ideas is actually under active development with new and improved features. We're very excited to have it available to you so that you all have the ability to post new suggestions and ideas for Apex and things that you'd like to see in the product. Please pay a visit when you can. Enjoy, from here on out, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you all for coming. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the next Apex office hours. Everyone have a great day. Thanks, Jeff. We really appreciate it. Bye, everyone.